Pieter Roozen is speaking from the Netherlands, covering using Jekyll as an API endpoint. We're going to stream a video of Pieter's talk and then he'll do a live demo and some questions afterwards.
Hello, my name is Pieter Roozen. I'm a graphic designer based in The Hague, the Netherlands. I'm owner at Studio Roozen, specialized in designing books, art catalogs and museum concepts for the main Dutch museums. Among others, more than 15 years in full service for the Van Gogh Museum Amsterdam. In 2015 I started working as a freelancer again. Of course, the portfolio website of Studio Roozen was made in Jekyll. I started to use Jekyll when I learned the basics of web development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. But as the JavaScript part was growing, I was attracted to developing single-page applications in JavaScript, like in React. Although it is not impossible to integrate React in Jekyll, it doesn't make much sense to me to use two website generators at the same time, even aside from the issues in development you may encounter. Yet, I didn't say goodbye to Jekyll at this point at all. It is actually very well possible to use Jekyll in creating API endpoints that can be consumed by other website generators. In this demo, I will show the combination with React. That way, you are completely free in your development while enjoying the benefits of a simple, static and block-aware Jekyll application. This time as a real backend. The reason why I love Jekyll is because it has a very elegant manner of separating content from logic, including HTML. With it, you can use Markdown to write coded content without writing HTML code yourself. In fact, I noticed that it's very similar to the way in the early days we would use text content written in Word in combination with Quark Express DTP software. So it feels all very intuitive for a graphic designer like me. And the editors I work with could use the Markdown without problems. These days, APIs to transfer content around the web are very popular, because APIs are faster in delivering content than conventional database systems. Even the two most popular PHP frameworks, WordPress and Drupal, came with RESTful API plugin solutions. APIs are RESTful if you can do HTTP requests like GET, PUT, POST and DELETE. So, how about Jekyll, as it is very good at separating content from the logic? But Jekyll is static, so you can only use the GET method here. Not a big problem, because you don't need to do all the CRUD operations in one and the same application. That's where we use Cloud Cannon for, and we can do effectively the same as POST, PUT and DELETE right there. Typically, Jekyll is used because it is simple, safe, block-aware and fast, but the functionality is limited. It is especially useful for presentational websites, blogs, or even museum websites. In fact, taken all together, this makes Jekyll a perfect match when we use its content as API used in applications with more functionality. Or what if you have a limited amount of data and you need a fake API in the proof of concept? I know that there are different solutions out there to use fake online APIs for testing, like JSON placeholder. But you still have to code your content, and nobody likes doing that. With Jekyll, on the other hand, you can write content just like an editor. But let's get started now. For this demo, I designed a simple Jekyll website about cookbooks called Mangiar Bene, dedicated to the famous Italian businessman and writer Pellegrino Artusi. His book, Science in the Kitchen and the Art of Eating Well, is recognized as the most significant Italian cookbook and is still an inspiration for modern chefs. In fact, it was the first cookbook for family cooking at home. Anyway, the demo website is a collection of modern cookbooks in the same tradition. It consists of two collections, one of 15 cookbooks and another of 48 recipes, as well as a blog from which this talk is the latest post. You can go to books. They are organized per kitchen type, such as Italian, Dutch, Oriental. From here we can go to the page of a book. Let's go to Science in the Kitchen. Now to the bottom of the page. Here we see the recipes that are associated to this book. So at book pages, the recipes collection is called as well. Let's go to Salsa Verde. From here we go to all the recipes, and they are organized per dish type: starter, main, dessert, basics. And we can go to posts, where you will see that this Jekyll talk is the latest post. And back to the homepage. From here to the bottom, sorry, this is a spoiler, because here you can find all the links to the endpoints. The Jekyll website is hosted at Cloud Cannon. Okay, subsequently I developed a single page application in React that just uses the content from the Jekyll application as JSON data. The React site is hosted in the Netherlands. The two websites are exactly the same, only the background color is different. But let me explain first. In Jekyll, it is possible to relate collections and posts from the content of the YAML front matter blocks. We can call the recipes and add the book data to each recipe. Likewise, we can call the books and add the recipes that belong to a book. Both result in a data schema that is similar to the many-to-many relationships used in databases. So what if in Jekyll we could use this technique to create a JSON file that contains the same structure and make it available to the internet? So we need JSON files. Let's create them in Jekyll. First, we need a folder, let's call it API, with files for books, recipes and blog. In the front matter block, we just set the layout to null, and that's it. Now we can construct the JSON object and establish the same relations as we did before in creating the pages for books, recipes and posts. There's only one problem here. The JSON object, code block, ends with a comma. So the last recipe ends also with a comma. JSON, however, disallows trailing commas. Now, in Liquid, you can eliminate the last comma with the unless for loop last statement. Now we have valid JSON. The form of JSON is very much dependent on the language in which the data is consumed. In the case of React, the best advice is to keep the JSON tree as flat as possible. This pattern, called denormalization, is well known in both relational as non-relational databases. In this case, we would connect the recipes data with the books data using a book ID, instead of calling all the data of each book as nested in the recipes object. With Jekyll, we can establish every structure of JSON we want, also deeply nested ones. Okay, this is going to be a little more technical now. In case of the nested JSON, we would have to do some more effort to get rid of the trailing comma in the last JSON object code block. That's because there is an if statement involved. Since the if statement works as a filter, and therefore not all iterations will become valid, a comma cannot be avoided here. Let me explain. Eliminating the last comma with the unless for loop last statement will not work here in case the last iteration is not valid to the condition. In other words, the last iteration that is valid to the condition might not be the last of the for loop as a whole, resulting in the last comma. If this is a little bit hard to understand, you can inspect all of the code at GitHub. You will find a link in the footer of the website Manjarbene. The solution is to use the push method to a fresh empty array in order to create a new array with the desired content. This way we don't need the conditional statement anymore, because all the iterations will be valid. More interesting perhaps, because Jekyll is often used for blogging, is the fact that we can use the same technique to create a blog API from the Jekyll data. Now in the API folder, create a file called blog.json and follow the same instructions as before. Here we want to use the content of a post as well, while using Markdown text to HTML conversion, resulting in HTML tags in your output. Therefore, you need to use the JSONify filter here. Let's take it to the next level now. The blog API will grow over time and may at some point contain hundreds of blog posts. With respect to the API design in this demo, this might exceed the performance boundaries of JavaScript, and the application might crash. What can we do to prevent this? The first step is to minimize the content of blog.json. Here, from each blog post object, in fact, we only need title, category and date for the blog page. Doing so, we get rid of the huge content text block. Next, we need a solution for the individual pages of each blog post. Now provide a folder, call it writings, and copy the post files from the post folder. Here we need some refactoring. We don't need to call the date in the title anymore, because we just call it in the YAML block. And finally, we should change the file extension to JSON. In the config file, you need to call the writings collection and set a default layout. In doing this, we will lose all the typical behavior of the post format in Jekyll, such as the date format and the support for categories and tags. But in the targeted JavaScript environment, this would not work anyway. Besides, in JavaScript, you can deal with these topics even more easily than in Jekyll. Now we need to Markdownify and JSONify in setting the value of content, resulting in valid JSON in the output. Hosting the Jekyll website on either GitHub or the CMS for Jekyll, Cloud Cannon, makes it possible to edit the content. You will quickly see that this is in sync with the application that consumes the content. Final thoughts. As mentioned before, it is important to respect the performance boundaries of JavaScript. Here we could also think of pagination, indexation, and search operations. Let's quickly recap. We want to make the content of a Jekyll website available to the web as JSON. In the example website, Manjarbene, it involves 3 different collections: books, recipes and posts. We create a new folder and name it API. In the API folder, we create 3 JSON files: books, recipes, blog, and set the layout to null. Now we can establish the same relationships between the data like we did for the Jekyll pages. The form of the JSON is dependent on the language in which the data is consumed. But the general advice is to keep the JSON tree as flat as possible. We use the unless for loop last statement, so we get rid of the trailing comma. Doing so, we achieve valid JSON. The content block always needs a JSONify filter. To respect the performance boundaries of JavaScript, we use the power of Jekyll to create collections of individual files, books, recipes and posts. We set the JSON for each collection in a separate layout file. Here, because we are not dealing with a markdown file, but a JSON file instead, the content value needs a markdownify before the JSONify filter. Well, that's all there is to it. I hope my talk was inspiring. There's a lot more you can do with Jekyll than with Jekyll on its own. Thank you for listening, and happy coding to you all.
Thanks for that, Pieter. I really like the idea of separating content from the presentation. I think it just shows how flexible Jekyll can be. So you've got a demo for us. Let me switch over to you. All right, okay. You're live.
Okay. Well, on the left screen, you will be seeing the Manjarbene website. I'm showing the posts here, and I go to the sourdough item. And now I show you quickly in the VS Code editor. I show you a little extra line. I say, for example, always use stone mill flour. And I used one hashtag here, which means that it turns out to be H1. I save it. And now I go to my local host and always use stone milled flour here. Now I will be going to, let's see, to GitHub Desktop, and then 1, 2, and it's only when it pushes, now it pushes to GitHub, and this is connected to Cloud Cannon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we go to the Trim Seahorse CloudVent.net, and when I refresh the page, here it is. Now we can go to the React site, and you see it's in sync. Well, that's what I wanted to show.
That's great. Yeah, really cool.
So it all works.
And a live demo too. Very impressive.
Yeah. Okay.
So when did you first start looking at Jekyll in React?
Well, as I told in the video, I started with Jekyll about 5 years ago, just to learn. Well, I'm a graphic designer, you know, so we did develop, so we designed a website, but we didn't know anything about all the stuff behind it. So I really wanted to learn it. And I started. I found Jekyll very well in learning all those techniques. So, but after a while, I wanted to learn more JavaScript, and then started to learn React. And well, in React you don't have data, so first I worked with single files, but then I thought, well, maybe it will be working, and I just tried it, and it worked. So then I got more into it, and a few friends around here, they gave me some tips, and well, that's how it. Okay. And then it was very funny because I was talking to George, and I said to him, well, why don't you have a topic about this item? And he said, well, you're very welcome to give a presentation about this. I said, no. That's not what I mean. I thought, well, you will be doing it. And then, well, after a while, I got confident and made it myself, also with your help and a few others. And so I think it's a really nice thing as it is now, because I tried to find something about this topic, and it turned out that well, I found just one a blog item from somebody from Switzerland, and he showed well, the possibility of JSON files, etc. But he wasn't doing anything with it. So I thought, well, I have to show that it really works and how it works with all the problems you encounter.
Awesome. And do you have any projects coming up that you're going to use this tech stack on?
Well, I'm working at a big project, and I want to use it there. It's a biological fresh products grocery, and they deliver at home. So well, I know it's a small company, small project, and I'm thinking of using it for this project.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your time, Pieter.